Well, you know,
I think God and Moses both just have enormous respect for each other.
come live with me.
What gladiator has that big white spear inspires
Look, the judges are not. Even the Egyptian judge is impressed.
Until recently, you claimed that the Earth revolved around the sun.
Welcome to History Bites. I'm Rick Green. Whenever someone famous or rich gets off scot-free for a crime, it seems as if there's one set of laws for a select few and another for the rest of us. In fact, in medieval England, that's exactly how it was, officially. There was one set of laws for most folks that the king enforced, and another set implemented in a separate court which applied to the clergy. This was good for priests who could speak their conscience without worrying too much about what the king thought. It wasn't so good for the king who had to listen to it all. King Henry wanted the church firmly under his control, so he had his right-hand man and chancellor, Thomas Becket, ordained as Archbishop of Canterbury, the top cleric in the land. Now the two of them could harmonize the legal systems in Henry's own special way and put an end to the church courts. That was Henry's plan, but it went awry, leading to murder, betrayal, and courtroom drama. All the ingredients for primetime television.
In the Anglo-Saxon criminal justice system, there are two distinct but equally important bodies: the king, who controls the lay courts, and the church, which oversees the ecclesiastic courts. These are their stories.
Ellen, you're back in Canterbury. Why'd the Baron need you in Northumbria?
He just needed some extra help cleaning up the castle after the siege.
Messy?
Huh? The whole 9 yards. Corpses of diseased animals fired over the walls to spread the plague. And I'd be surprised if that moat has ever had a brush to it. You should see the ring around that thing. And don't even get me started on the portcullis.
Don't worry, I won't. By the
They
way,
had one of those new ones with the metal spikes on it. I mean, it's not enough that they have to crush anyone who tries to get in. They have to shish kebab them as well. Do you know how hard it is to try and get a man's body off one of those spikes? Especially when it's been dried on. Ugh.
Oh my God, I'm gonna be sick!
You are. Imagine being there. It's not like they supplied me with a pair of gloves or anything.
Stop spinning that, would you?
Well, looks like somebody sure did a number on that guy.
I found this on the floor.
Bag it.
Oh, and I got this too. I don't know, it looks like the top of his head.
And I thought he just had the world's worst haircut. Anybody know who this guy is?
Yeah, there's his mitre and his crozier. It's the Archbishop of Canterbury, the closest person to God in all of England.
Yeah? Yeah, looks like he just got a whole lot closer.
Who was accused of murder, underwent a traditional trial by ordeal, sticking his hand into a pot of boiling water and removing stones. 3 days later, no blisters. In a normal trial by ordeal, the lack of blistering would be clear proof of innocence. But like more and more people who face trial by ordeal, this blacksmith had prepared himself by reciting magic spells and then coating his arm with an enchanted mixture of egg white and radishes. Tonight's flashpoint? With the new merchant class buying expensive charms and chemical mixtures to ward off burns and boils, is this a case of justice for sale?
Well, witnesses say there were 4 of them along with a contingent of soldiers, but they weren't from around here, so nobody recognized them.
I found a few monks who might have seen something, but I couldn't get anything out of them. I beat them, I threatened them, but they refused to talk.
Were they Carthusians, Ray?
I think so, yeah.
You knew they'd taken a vow of silence, right? Excuse me, gentlemen.
Hey, what do you think you're doing?
We're taking over this case. That's what.
Hey, that man was the highest official of the king's court, and we're officers of the king's court.
Sorry to disappoint you, Lieutenant.
Canonic internal affairs.
That's right. This matter took place inside a church. That means it falls under canon law and will be tried in the ecclesiastic court. You're out of your jurisdiction. Clear out. They will call you if we need you for anything.
Jousting diction, my hindquarters. We're not giving up that easily, all right? What do you got?
Well, from what I gather, the killers must have been upset that the Archbishop Becket had suspended and excommunicated the king's bishops. And plus, get this, he threatened to invalidate the coronation of King Henry's son.
Talk about making powerful enemies. The king!
Doesn't get much bigger.
Was the Archbishop involved in anything else? Any other beefs or arrests?
Hey, what about that shoemaker case?
Yeah. Andrew of Greenwood was the arresting bailiff.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a shoemaker, all right. I killed a guy in cold blood right on the grounds of an abbey.
But it doesn't say anything here about a punishment.
Oh, yeah, there was a punishment, all right. A public whipping.
Well, at least those monks made him pay his debt to society.
What? You kidding me? Yeah, they released him, then they said I never should have made an arrest for a crime that was committed on church grounds. Yeah, then they whipped me. Punk monks. You know how much ribbon I took for that down at the station?
I can imagine.
Yeah. And then they asked me if I'd make the arrest in the Philip of Broye case, too. And I said, yeah, right, like I'm gonna get my ass flogged? I don't think so.
I've always loved mathematics. I can go all the way up to 20 without using my fingers or toes. 21 at the public baths. I often use these numbers to tell people how many things I have, or in the market to say how many of something I want. I can ask the pie man for the largest possible number of pies, which in my case is 20, or the smallest possible number, which is 1. It's a great system, but now the Arabs are saying our way of counting doesn't add up. We need a new smallest number, a number they call a 0, a number that means nothing. In math terms, we've hit a new low. Why should I memorize this new number? What can you possibly count with it? Nothing. How many things can you count? None at all. If I go up to the pie man and say, I want a number of pies, he asks me, how many? How's he going to react if I say 0? Does he ask me for 0 pennies in exchange?
Because of the wild boars. Is that why you're worrying, George?
No, Gracie, I'm not worried. I was just wool gathering.
Oh, my Uncle Stumps used to do that.
Oh, yeah? He was lazy?
Oh, no. He was a sheep rustler. He'd pull the wool right out from under your eyes.
Your Uncle Stump stole sheep?
Oh, why, sure. Sheep, deer, anything he could catch, until he was caught. He used to wear these tight hats. Then one day, he lost all his hair.
Because of the hats?
Oh, no, because they cut off his head.
For sheep rustling? Why didn't they just cut off one hand?
Well, it wasn't his first offense. That's why we called him Uncle Stumps. His real name was Uncle Bartholomew, but we called him Stumps to tease him.
Well, Stumps was shorter.
After they cut off his head.
In this day and age, a number like 0 could be very useful. After all, it's a number most of us can relate to. How much food have you got? 0. How much land do you own? 0. How many of your kids lived through the winter? 0. For 6 minutes, I'm Andrew of Rooney.
My Aunt Flora used to have to feed him through the neck from the handle of a wooden spoon. Drip, 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 just like that.
Well, that's low.
In sickness and in health, George. They were closer than they'd ever been. And then one day she was feeding him as usual, and her bracelet slid off her wrist and down into the hole. Then she noticed he was dead. Imagine dying from a bracelet.
Yeah, she must have been sad.
Oh, sure. It was a favorite bracelet.
It doesn't take a wizard or an alchemist to see that the blow was strong. So strong, in fact, that it severed the top of the Archbishop's head and broke off when the sword struck the ground.
Looks like we're looking for someone who knew how to handle a sword.
You got that right. A two-hander, too. I ran it through the system and came up with the match. A sword with this balance and strength could only come from one place. Toledo, Spain.
Sorry? Toledo where?
Toledo, Spain, where they make the finest swords in the world.
Not many nobles would have the expertise to use a sword like this, let alone the resources to buy it. Your assailants were pros, gentlemen.
Knights.
Vicious ones, too. I examined the body and found out that after they cut off the top of Mr. Becket's head, they stuck another sword in and scrambled his brains around a little.
Guess they didn't want Becket remembering who killed him when he showed up in heaven, huh?
When we come back, how business problems can kill a friendship and a friend. When British church leader Thomas Becket was ordained Archbishop of Canterbury by King Henry, well, Henry expected something in return. You anoint my back, I'll anoint yours. He figured Becket would ensure that his reforms of the ecclesiastic courts were pushed through. Finally, there would be one justice system for both clergy and ordinary folk, a system run by King Henry. But Becket wouldn't play ball. He defied the king and upheld many ecclesiastical privileges. Why? Well, some say he wanted to show the world he wasn't just Henry's yes man. Others say that once he'd been ordained, he suddenly got all religious. Maybe he just liked the power. Whatever it was, from King Henry's perspective, Thomas had gone from archbishop to archenemy.
Philippa Broy?
Go ahead. Make a move. I had to gut you right here like you did to that knight.
Hey, that was 3 years ago. Now I was acquitted for that.
How do you murder a knight and then get acquitted?
Okay, take it easy, guys, okay? I was never tried in the lay courts, okay? It's the system, see? Oh, come on. As a member of the clergy, I could be tried in the ecclesiastic court instead. All you have to do is swear an oath in front of the archbishop, and that's off the hook.
Nice.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet.
Does this little legal loophole have anything to do with Thomas Becket's death?
Okay. Look, I don't know much, but I do know the two court system, okay? I know the whole thing. It's the law. It's how the whole thing started. King Henry wanted more power over his court and his itinerant justice courts.
So, the king didn't like seeing the clergy beat the rats.
No, that's right. Yeah, he was tired of the clerics walking on crimes that they would have got the rock shower for had they been in the lay courts.
So, Henry wanted jurisdiction, but his old buddy Becket wouldn't play ball, huh?
And that's why Henry summoned the council at Clarendon to establish the king's customary rights over the church. Hey, man, that's all I know, I swear!
The new fall fashions for noble women. And with men going on crusades, there's more and more interest in chastity belts. So much for clothes make the man.
With the men gone for months, or God forbid, years, you want a chastity belt that's comfy. Look for the label. Make sure it's forged by a designer blacksmith. You want a good forger, not a forgery.
Well, that was just fine there. That was fine. That was the comedy stylings of Dribbly the buffoon and his talking stump. And now, coming up later in the show, Reginald of Exeter singing his courtly love song, "My lady is not of this earth, and my desires are so base and common they sully her very being." Okay, now settle down.
In a document called the Constitutions of Clarendon, King Henry set out to increase the power of his lay courts. The document said essentially, okay, if a member of the clergy is charged with a crime, then the church or ecclesiastic courts could determine the verdict. But the state's court would determine the punishment. When Becket refused to approve the document, Henry became incensed. So Becket did what most of us would do when faced with a king throwing a temper tantrum. He fled to France for 6 years.
Becket told the king he'd sign the Clarendon documents, then he backed out and wouldn't sign.
The king was mad at Becket.
Mad enough to kill?
Mad enough to bring him up on perjury charges?
That's what forced Becket into exile for 6 years.
Yeah, similar thing happened to me and my first wife. She found out I was a liar, I got out of town.
So this exile of Becket created more bad blood between them.
Then he came back from exile, and Becket excommunicated all of the king's bishops. Sounds like motive to me. Let's bring in some of the king's knights for questioning.
Wait a minute, just the two of us? You saw what they did to the archbishop.
Gentlemen, I suggest you wear very hard hats.
Yeah. Come on, Ray.
They were fed to wild dogs. And finally, from a story about crime and punishment to a story about crime prevention, our roads and highways could become safer for commercial travelers and pilgrims on pilgrimages. Authorities are planning to cut down underbrush and trees up to 100 yards on either side of major roads. This will increase cart driver visibility and make it easier to see highway robbers. As well, ditches will be filled in, denying bandits a hiding place. In places where these measures have been tried, the number of highway robberies has declined dramatically. The goal is to reduce the crime rate in rural areas until the dangerous rural areas are as safe as big cities.
Any chance we can try this in the lay courts instead of the ecclesiastic courts?
I don't know, Adam. The four knights say they were acting on orders from the king. Now, the king isn't a member of the clergy, and he wasn't on church grounds when the murder took place.
But he says he never told him to do anything.
Who do we believe?
I don't care who you believe. You get somebody. They're calling our departed Archbishop a martyr, and the Pope's office wants a conviction.
Maybe if we offer one of the knights a deal. Absolution if he rolls on the others.
We don't have the authority to be...
What is it?
More good news. Apparently they've already discovered 3 miracles by Mr. Becket's grave.
Is that a bad thing?
Having your victim pronounced a saint before we get a conviction? That's a bad thing. That people be calling for our heads. Or maybe just the top piece of our heads.
In a related story, criminals denied their traditional cover for highway robberies are now staging mass raids into towns and markets.
So, Your Majesty, these 4 knights were in your service?
So what? Everyone's in my service. I'm the king.
And as the king, King Henry, you get to order the executions of people all the time. Isn't that right?
Sure, if they commit a capital crime. It's one of the perks of the job. It's perfectly legal.
When the clergy break the law, they're tried in ecclesiastical court. What do you think of that court?
Not much.
Because they're not allowed to pass sentences of execution or mutilations?
That's right.
And you resent the fact that your judicial system can't punish the clergy.
You're damn right I do. I'm the king. It's my God-given right to be able to mutilate whoever I see fit.
But you took it one step further this time. The execution was an archbishop.
It wasn't an execution. It was an accident.
So you admit you had him killed?
No! I didn't tell them to kill him. Sure, I was upset with Thomas, but all I said was, who will rid me of this turbulent priest? I never thought they'd cut his head off. If I'd wanted that, I would have said, can one of you knights please go slice the Archbishop's head open? Something like that.
No further questions.
In medieval times, Europe was run by the church and the nobility. The church gave the nobility God's stamp of approval. The nobility gave the church protection. But where there's power, there's conflict. For the average serf back in 1170, it wasn't easy to decide which side was right, the state or the church. I mean, the king was the sovereign ruler of the land, but the church had another king on their side, Jesus Christ. So people were confused about who to believe. Of course, back then, they were confused about a lot of things.
And I believe we have Roger on the line. What can we do for you, Roger?
Well, I've been married for 10 years, and I thought my wife and I had a loving relationship, and then 2 weeks ago, she gave birth to twins. Twins! I feel so betrayed.
Boy, you know, the twins are always tough to take because, as you know, it means that your wife has to be impregnated by 2 different men.
I know. What do I do now?
Well, clearly to satisfy your honor, you need to kill the man who did this.
Right.
But the question is, how do you find that man? So let me ask you, who do the babies look like?
Really, the truth is the only person they look like is each other. What? What is it?
Well, 2 babies who look identical, family resemblance.
Yeah?
Your wife obviously had relations with your brother on the same night she did with you.
Well, it was kind of like King Henry said. Me and Sir Richard and Sir William and Sir Hugh were hanging around at the palace when King Henry got word that Thomas Becket had suspended all of his bishops who'd helped in his son's coronation. So King Henry got kind of mad and he started shouting, "Who will rid me of this turbulent priest?" Like he said. And so me and Huey and Richie and Willie, we're all like, "Ooh, me, I'll do it.
And you thought the king was serious?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you don't want someone to rid you of someone, why ask?
Sir William, can you describe what happened when the 4 of you arrived at Canterbury Cathedral?
Well, we went inside,
crossed ourselves, lit some votive candles, put some coins in the poor box, and then we killed the Archbishop.
Did the Archbishop have a weapon, Sir Hugh? Did he strike at any of you?
No. He didn't want to fight. We had to really push him. Then he kind of sort of figured out this was it, and he knelt and prayed, which made it easier to get him.
King Henry II, for your part in this brutal slaying, there will be an interdict on your lands in Normandy, in addition to a personal interdict upon you. You shall not be allowed to enter a church for a period of not less than 3 years. And your men, Reginald Fitz-Urse, William of Tracy, Hugh Morville, and Richard de Breton, I find you all guilty in the murder of Archbishop Thomas Becket. Your penance shall be a crusade in the Holy Land for a period of not less than 14 years.
I feel bad for King Henry. They say he fasted for days when he heard the news of Becket's death. I don't think he meant for this to happen.
Well, he didn't try to stop them. Don't forget who the real victim here is. The man who had his skull sliced open.
Don't feel too sorry for the late Archbishop. Thomas Becket devoted his entire life to strengthening the powers of the Church and reforming the archaic customs of England. Do you think those things would be happening as quickly as they are now if he were still alive? That's the problem with being a martyr. You never get to see your best work.
Thomas Becket was canonized only 3 years after his death. In today's terms, that's like waiving the mandatory 5-year waiting period to get Gretzky into the Hockey Hall of Fame. He was that popular. From Becket's example, people learned the virtue of standing up for one's principles. They also learned that no matter how important you are, oppose the king in your history, and history bites.
So my question to you, Jake, would be, why do so many women partake in this lurid behavior when they have to know they're going to get caught?
Well, you know, unfortunately, women are so insatiable that they feed their ravenous desires without even thinking about the consequences. And what's even worse, these women more often than not deny their obvious unfaithfulness. But as they say, I mean, the proof is in the pudding, or whatever other nickname she has for her